St.Bartholomew's church stands sturdy at the top of the hill in the heart of Colne, a town in northeast Lancashire, only a couple of miles from its border with Yorkshire, as it has done for 1,000 years. This year, 1995, the town is celebrating a small section of its history, for it is 100 years since Colne was awarded borough status. The little fact that it has since been absorbed into the larger borough of Pendle being quietly forgotten for the time being. Now, though, it's not the town or its church as a whole that concerns us, but the bells in the old tower. Bill Heaton is the man to tell us something of the history of the bells, as he's been ringing them since his youth and is now captain of the tower. Here, in the ringing chamber, Bill is in his element.
And here we ring all our 8 bells. Now, the first bells mentioned anywhere for Colne Parish Church were records in 1550. And in 1674, we had 6 bells. Those bells, of course, gradually were worn, and unfortunately they had to be replaced again in 1814. The cost of those bells had to be met by our own church and also by daughter churches in the district round here, such as Marsden and Barrowford and Fulridge, and they obviously, having to pay for bells, which really were only going to be rung in Colne Parish Church, they didn't like to spend so much, because the bell ringers at that time, having rung 6 bells for a long time, most of the Church of England churches had 8 bells, so they wanted 8 bells. But the people who were having to contribute towards them said, well, I'm afraid you had 6 bells, and if we've got to pay money towards it, then we just can't do it. You must have 6 bells. Now, the bell ringers of Colne agreed, but they had a meeting amongst themselves, and then they suddenly realised that nothing had been said about the actual weight of the bells. So when the order was placed, whoever was responsible asked the bell founder people, Mears and Steenbank in London, to put the weight of 8 bells into 6 bells. Now that made those 6 bells to be very on a lower scale, and also they were quite strong and would carry, the sound would carry further. Furthermore, if we added 2 more later, there would be a higher notes, and of course the bells wouldn't cost as much because they would be lighter. But anyway, we got the 6 bells, and Mears and Steenbank had made them. They sent them by the North Sea, up the North Sea to Hull, and then by river and by canal across the country to Fulridge. From Fulridge they were brought by horse and cart, and then they were installed here in the tower above. In 1900, one of the church wardens supplied the money to enable us to buy 2 extra bells. So then the 2 high note bells, the treble and the second bell, were installed in 1900. So now we have 8 bells, and they have been ringing since 1900. The 6 bells that were installed in 1800 were first rang for an important occasion, for the victory of our armed forces at Waterloo. And that must have been quite an occasion too, because I think the bells would be rung throughout England at that time. When those bells were put in 1814, of course the old bells were just taken out, and they of course went down to Mears and Steenbank, and the biggest bell was broken up and it was remelted and made into several hand bells. and the ringers at that time were given one handbell each. And this is the handbell that was given to them. It's quite effective too. My great-grandfather, he rang the bells for quite a long time. In fact, at one time I have a church newspaper cutting which mentions that William Heaton was the oldest bell ringer in England at the time. So the heaviest bell weighs 1,600 weights, and the lightest bell weighs 500 weights.
Another flight of steps and we can have a look at the bells themselves, hanging lifeless in the belfry. Their wheels, to which the bell ropes are attached, and their stays pointing upwards. We're nearly at the top of the tower now, and it's a fine day to take in the commanding view from the roof. The town hall is a mere stripling of 100 years. Older than the town hall by some 80 years, the former grammar school replaced a building dating from the 16th century. But back to the bells. Standing now in the base of the tower, illuminated by the old stained glass, Bill continues the story.
Well, I first started bell ringing when I was 16 years old, and at that time we had 10 bell ringers. Now the church used to pay those bell ringers. They gave them £10 to be shared between the 10 for 1 year, so that each person got £1 each, so that if anyone wanted to join them at all, it was rather difficult, because anyone who came would have to share in the £10. But at that time, I was friendly with 2 or 3 of the bell ringers, and they asked me if I would like to join, and of course I would, because my great-grandfather, of course, was one of the old bell ringers of Colne Parish Church. So they took me in and started to teach me how to ring the bells. And I have been ringing now right up, I've been ringing now for 64 years. So I don't know how long I shall go on, but I still keep trying, but there are limitations. But my great-grandfather, he must have been very good, because he was ringing right until he was 85. So he must have done all right in those days. And he rang the tenor bell as well, which is the heavy one. I was taught to ring on the 5th bell, which was much more comfortable for me. And his name does appear on a plaque upstairs showing that he'd rung a peal. Now I've just rung 1 peal, and that was just after the last war. And when I came home from the last war and went to a bell ringers meeting, I mentioned this, that I hadn't actually rung a peal before. So they very kindly, five of them came from the North East Lancs Federation, and they said they would ring a peal with me. So they came, and we rang a peal of Bob Minor, which took us about 2 3/4 hours. Now I hadn't been ringing during the whole of the war, because I was a soldier at that time, and unfortunately my wrists were not quite as strong as they should have been, because when a bell ringer rings, he uses his wrists quite a lot. His wrists exercise, and he has very strong wrists. So that by the time I'd finished ringing that peal, my wrists were very limp, and I was having to pull the bell by my body, not just by my arms. Anyway, it worked out all right, and I managed the peal, and I now have 1 peal against my name, which is very, very, very meagre compared to many other bell ringers in this country. But it was very enjoyable, and I've always enjoyed ringing, and one of the things that we ringers have never to forget is that when we ring, we're trying to call the people to church. We ring the church bells on Sundays because there's a church service there, and we're asking people to come to church to worship God. But unfortunately these days, I'm afraid attendances at church are not very great. So, but if we keep the bells ringing, perhaps a change will come and people will realise just why we are ringing the bells.
And he's still well able to ring. The first action is to ring the bells up. That is, swing them through an increasing arc until they are upside down, finally letting them come to rest with their stays resting against stops out of sight. Unless you wanted to be literally deafened, you wouldn't want to stay in the belfry now. Now they are up, we have a brief chance to have another look at them before ringing starts in earnest.
Look to, steady away, yeah.
Today, as part of the centenary celebrations, a visiting band is ringing a special peal led by their captain Jean Barnes. Bell ringing, especially ringing changes, is an art which has to be learnt through practice and example. The wheels to which the ropes are attached are all the same diameter, so the movement of all 8 ropes is the same. And this gives the ringers the ability to control the timing of the swing, holding it back or bringing it forward so that the order in which the bells sound can be varied. The leader's commands direct the ringers to vary the tune. The band has to watch each other closely to be sure they are keeping the right interval between the notes. Jean Barnes has wide experience of ringing and can explain some of its fascination.
Well, I enjoy ringing. It's a combination of the physical action, which is very satisfying in itself, almost like rowing, very rhythmical, and the mental exercise, because you have to do quite a lot of thinking, almost like doing logic problems, and the music that results. It's the sounds of the different bells. The combination of all of them, it's wonderful, and that's just the ringing. There's the social side as well. We go on trips, we get groups of people. Each tower, nearly each tower, practices once a week, and after we've rung, we've all worked at various things and improved ourselves. We usually go out for a drink, and when I go on holiday, I usually go on holiday somewhere in Britain, and a quiet night in the tent just doesn't happen. I can go to a local practice by ringing up a local secretary, find out where the practices are, and I've got instant friends. And as long as you can handle a bell, you're always made welcome. They ring the same methods or tunes wherever you go. The satisfaction's immense. I love it. It started in Britain, mostly in England, although quite a lot of churches in Wales and now in Scotland. It spread to Ireland, America, Canada, Australia, some parts of Africa, but not on the continent, except for one place in the north of Italy, where they do a different sort of change ringing, but they do ring the bells full circle, like we do, which means we can control the speed of the ringing. And so we arrange the bells. We start in rounds, bum, 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 and then we alter them to get various combinations of changes, which can sound quite magical. Continental bells are hung differently, so they swing in just a small arc, and they chime, really, almost at random, sometimes resulting in a jangle. Sounds like a jangle to us, because we're used to a very fixed pattern. Well, the bells are tuned to a major scale. These are tuned in F, from the treble, which is a high F, E, D, C, B flat, A, G, and down to the F, low F, which is a tenor. And so it's just in rounds when we start, just a descending major scale. And that's the starting position. And then you can arrange them in quite a lot of different ways. I love the sound of Colne bells. They're not particularly easy to ring, largely because they're on the ground floor, and as you can see there's quite a lot of rope, which makes them jiggle about a bit. So you need quite an experienced band to ring them. But the sound is beautiful. Each ring of bell sounds different. Either the tuning's slightly different, just the tone quality of them. And I like these very much indeed. In different parts of the country, the bells will actually sound different, but different numbers of bells. If you've got 6 bells, they're tuned to the lowest 6 notes of the scale. But some towers have 5 bells, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And quite a lot of 12-bell towers have extra bells, so that you don't have to ring the heavy bells when you only want to ring 8 of them. And there is one tower in Birmingham which actually has 16 bells tuned to 2 octaves and a note. And I haven't rung those yet. There are never enough ringers. We can always do with more, because not everyone is able to ring a quarter peal or a peal. It's quite difficult. It takes quite a long time to get to that stage. But lots of people can enjoy the experience of ringing and be able to ring touches, and the important thing is ringing the bells on Sunday mornings, because that's what they're there for in the first place. And it's something you can start when you're perhaps in your teens, even younger, depending on the bells and the policies of the local tower captain. And, well, I know somebody over 80 who rings regularly. It's something you can do all your life. In fact, my son, who's now 18, was feeling a bit cheesed off with ringing for a while, and he said, well, how much longer do I have to ring on Sundays and practice once a week? And I said, for the rest of your life? And he paused for a moment and he said, yes, okay. Almost to say, somebody has spent time teaching me to ring. The least I can do is ring every week. And that made me very happy.
Well, that was 1995. Jean would be well pleased by the young band of ringers at the start of 2000 AD getting ready to start the midday ring on New Year's Day.
1995. When we started to ring, it was over at Nelson in St. Philip's. Their band slowly dwindled away to nothing, and we decided, right, well, it's time we resurrected our tower. So we came over here, did a lot of work to this ringing room, moved the ropes from downstairs, because that's where they previously were, up here, because it's a better ringing atmosphere up here. You know, it was originally designed downstairs so the congregation could see what the ringers were doing, but it works the other way as far as we're concerned. We couldn't hear the bells downstairs and they distracted us, so we thought it was better to move back up here. Then slowly after that a few others started, and 4 years on we now have a 12-strong band. We've not got everybody here this morning, but we're doing quite well.